So we move on really to fifth section, and we're taking a little break, if you like, a little break from Alf Burrows to look at some other things. Of course, a matter of taste, because it's really about what you'd like to look. And it's really telling you the sort of information that you might consider as you branch out from your family tree to consider other angles, other possible sorts of records and so on. Because, when you have a record office, and each county has a record office, some cities as well, so you will find in those record offices and the archives, libraries and so on, they're absolutely stuffed full of all sorts of records. Many the sort of thing that Jenny talked about, parish records and so on, military records, but business records, club records, society records, private archives, family and state records. It's a huge resource, absolutely bulging with treasures for you to discover and to explore. So let's have a quick look at the sort of things you might branch out into. We looked earlier about into birth, deaths and marriage records, baptisms, burials, banns, all those things. One area we didn't explore were wills, probate records, wills and things. You might say, oh, well, yes, my ancestors enough to leave a will. Well, I don't know what your advice would be in a case like that, Jenny. If someone came in and said to you, oh, my family weren't wealthy, they wouldn't have left a will. What would you say to that?
Well, I'd say it's always worth checking. In general, people left things that left property that was important to them. Some very poor people left wills, including framework knitters, where the stocking frame, which was basically a cottage industry, it was hardly ever in big factories, was the most important possession that the family had. So it was important to make sure it went to the right person once the usually the head of the household, the man, had died. So they did pay attention to it.
Yes, yeah, I think that's good advice. Always check. It won't do any harm. It's easy enough. I mean, you'll get a form like this to fill in on Find My Past or Ancestry. Type in a name and a year. You could put, 1700, give or take 20 years, John Smith, and see what comes up. You can explore your family tree and just, you never know. And it's always worth having a look. The other thing that people often say is that, oh, well, I can't read that sort of thing. Oh, no.
You can see why.
It's beyond me. But as Jenny said, the hand often far easier than you think. It's a matter of, I think she said, getting your eye in, and that's exactly right. And I've chosen this example. This is a very nice Leicester will. This is from 1538, and it's a priest, Sir William Reed of the Newark. He was in one of those colleges in the Newark in Leicester, right, before the Reformation. So this is 1538. But if you look at it, you could begin to read it, and the reason you can read it is that even though some of the letters are unfamiliar, some of the things he's talking about are unfamiliar, it's very, very neat. It's a beautifully written will. So even though it's from 1538, you look at it and you can begin to say, oh yes, in the name of God, amen. You could begin to read it. And the more confident you get with it and the more you read it, the more of the rest of it that you can read. So if you take nothing from this, is don't be afraid to have a go. This is why I say, dip in, have a go at it and try, and don't be put off because it's old, because quite often the handwriting is very good indeed and very neat. Bad handwriting is unreadable, whether it was written yesterday or 100 years ago. Good handwriting is always readable. This is another, this is a will. This is mid-18th century will. In actual fact, this is from my own family. And I haven't put it in for that reason. I put it in really because it's a nice will. It's, it's easy enough to read. Anybody could read this one. It's Zechariah Brewster of Cosen. and he's my great something or other, died in 1759. But the nice thing about it is if you're tracing your family tree, and this chap's on it, you go down halfway down the will and he starts talking about how he bequeaths something to his brother George Mowbray. And you think, oh, right, well, we can add to the family tree. George is there. His son, Thomas of Melton Mowbray. You think, oh, right, there's another bit of the family tree. Then he talks about his other brother, who's Joseph, and his 3 children, Joseph, Zachariah, and Elizabeth Elston, the wife of James Elston. And you think, wow, we're populating the family tree here. And that's the nice thing about a will, is that you can read about the feelings of someone, who their relatives were, but the whole point is that they will give you the family connections and links. That's the nice thing. And the other aspect that you often get with a will, not always, but often, you will have an inventory, because if you're having your will proved and you're bequeathing items, furniture or whatever, somebody will want to police it and make sure that you do actually possess 6 silver teaspoons, if that's what you're giving away. So they'll check your inventory. And Zachariah Brewster's inventory is there. And it's really rather nice to think that, in his house, he had a clock, a table, 6 chairs, and other small things worth £4. Now, you might not be related to Zachariah Brewster, but you might live in his house still. His house might still be standing. You might live in it, and you might be intrigued to know what he used the rooms for and how he furnished them. That he had a bed in the chamber and a cupboard and this, that, and the other. And out in the shed, he kept various pieces of equipment. So an inventory can be a very interesting thing to go to, really, for further research to reconstruct your house. So I would always say to people, yes, don't research the house, research the people who lived in it. We've mentioned earlier that quite often it's the poor who are best recorded. Wealthy people, they will keep records of their own expenditure, their own estate and so on like that. But even poor people are recorded, particularly if they are institutionalized, if they go into hospital, if they go into the army, if they go into prison. You get a full physical description of people. And in this case, this is the Leicester Workhouse. Do you remember Annie Burroughs went into Swain Street? Well, here we are. This is Swain Street. This is the old Victorian workhouse with the master and so on, and the other staff members standing outside. And it's rather nice because it records all those who went into it. And this is 1879. Do you want to tell us the story, Jenny? Why is this? Why did we pick this page?
Yes, I will. This page is a perfectly ordinary page, just before Christmas, isn't it? 1879. And we've got the Joseph Merrick, who's a hawker, and he's in the workhouse because he's unable to work. So he's just recorded along with all the other people who were admitted that day. But he is better known as the Elephant Man.
So there we are. So, one of Leicester's famous sons there in the workhouse. So yeah, there are records of all sorts of people that you can turn up in all sorts of places. Thank you, Jenny. Maps. We've talked a little bit about maps. We both of us have admitted in the past our delight in those 25-inch plans. And here we are. This is a very nice use of maps. There's an 18th century map, 1741, I think it is, a map of Leicester, and you can just see Wigston's Hospital and St Martin's and Greyfriars. Now, Greyfriars is an interesting place. And there you are. You can see the a Victorian map, a slightly later Victorian map of the same area, and it's research into maps like this that actually enabled the archaeologists using archives to find the body of Richard III. They were actually able to dig exactly where the chapter house of the old Greyfriars would have been, and there they are digging down through the car park, and it was pretty soon after that they actually did dig down on one of their first days, I think, and found the body of Richard III. Almost too good to be true, isn't it? But it just shows you what important discoveries sometimes come from archival research. Let's not neglect maps. Let's go back to maps again. I mean, this is a particularly interesting one because this is the 1883, I think it is, first edition of the 25-inch map of New Evington, and it's very nice because they've captured. It's a little snapshot of New Evington before it was really built. They've laid out the streets, but they haven't built any of the houses. So if you lived in Lancaster Street or Lichfield Street or so on, and somebody said to you, what was there before our house? There you are. You've got that intermediate stage where the fields are still there, but the houses are laid out. So it's really rather nice. And you can trace back in maps quite a long way if you're lucky. Really decent maps, certainly into the 18th century, with a bit of luck, a century before that.
I wonder if people did stand there and say they remembered when it was all field.
I bet they did, yes. I'm sure that it's one of those human things, isn't it? And similarly, photographs. We've talked about photographs, but photographs will give you a snapshot, literally, of what the place was like before things change. And here we've got Crown Hills, and we've got the circle on Crown Hills. We've got Wakeley's place next to it, but you can go right back. If you look in the top right hand corner, you can just see the medieval strip farming preserved in one field, which is, you're preserving a medieval landscape, but you're imprinting on top of it a 1920s 30s development of that circle. It's really a very nice record of the growth of Leicester. Leicester is actually growing outwards and outwards, and it's almost absorbed all that landscape. And it brings us back to catalogues, because how do you find all this material? Well, whatever record office you're interested in, whatever area, it's almost certainly going to have a catalogue online that you can look at from home. Almost certainly it'll be free to have access to it. And you can simply type in whatever you're interested in. Most of them are versatile enough to cope with that. So if you were interested, for example, in Crown Hills, I've typed in Crown Hills where that photograph was taken, and this is Leicestershire's Leicester and Rutland's catalogue. Crown Hills, it produces 32 entries about Crown Hills, and it goes from things like Crown Hills School Accident Book, which I suspect, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, I suspect it's closed, but at least we're telling you it exists, but for data protection reasons, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you've got 32, and it goes right down to DE 8797/427/ blah, 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 and that'll be photographs taken in 1984 of Gwendolyn Road. So all sorts of things are there, and you get an idea of the wealth of material relating to Crown Hills. So the moral, what is the moral of this story? The moral of the story is take the plunge, have a look, don't hang back. It's all yours. You're free to see most of this material, so get in there and have a look. Why not? It's easy enough to do. Get online, get onto your catalogue, have a look at the National Archives catalogue. If you put in National Archives in Google or some other search engine, it'll take you to their catalogue, and that's a national catalogue covering lots of record offices. And I'm sure if you put Crown Hills into that, you'll find something too. So there you are. So take the plunge.